moment my younger sister stood up at Thanksgiving and proudly announced that our parents were giving her the family house while I was getting absolutely nothing, the entire room exploded with applause. Everyone smiled, laughed, and congratulated her as if she had just won the lottery. I stayed calm, smiled quietly, and looked at my father before asking one simple question. "Dad, do you want to tell them the truth or should I?" The joy vanished from the room in seconds. My father's face turned pale, my sister's smile disappeared, and suddenly everyone realized they were about to witness something none of them expected. My name is Claire Morgan, and for most of my life I lived in the shadow of my younger sister, Madison. She was the favorite child. She received every opportunity, every compliment, and every bit of attention, while I learned to survive without expecting anything from my parents. I built my own career in Chicago and rarely asked anyone for help. The only reason I kept coming home was my grandmother, Eleanor, who always reminded me that one day the truth had a way of finding everyone. 6 months before that unforgettable Thanksgiving, my parents called me home and asked me to sign what they claimed were simple refinancing papers for the family home. Something felt wrong the moment I looked through the documents. There were missing details, confusing numbers, and rushed explanations. Instead of signing, I took the papers to my attorney. The next morning she called with news that changed everything. The documents were never about refinancing. They would have made me legally responsible for more than $100,000 in mortgage debt. My parents had secretly taken a second mortgage, missed months of payments, and were dangerously close to foreclosure. Soon after, my father asked me for money, claiming it was for medical bills. When I offered to pay the hospital directly, his story completely fell apart. That was when I realized they were desperately searching for someone to rescue them financially. When I refused, they quietly shifted their attention to Madison. She started posting online about becoming a homeowner, completely unaware that the beautiful house she was celebrating was drowning in debt. I spent the next few weeks gathering every public record, overdue notice, and mortgage statement I could legally obtain. I never wanted to embarrass my parents. I only wanted to make sure no one else became another victim of their lies. On Thanksgiving morning, I placed every document inside a folder before driving to dinner, hoping they would finally tell the truth before it was too late. They never did. As Madison proudly announced that she was receiving the house, I calmly placed my folder on the table. The room became silent as I explained that the house was not a gift, but a financial disaster. I revealed the unpaid mortgages, the foreclosure notices, and the debt waiting for whoever accepted ownership. Madison stared at me in disbelief before turning toward our parents, begging them to tell her I was lying. They could not answer because every word I spoke was backed by official documents. Her fiancé looked at the paperwork, then looked back at my parents. They had promised him a debt-free future, but instead they had hidden a financial nightmare. Heartbroken and furious, he admitted he could not marry into a family built on deception. Without another word, he walked out the front door, leaving Madison in tears. My father blamed me for destroying the family, but I reminded him that the family had been broken the moment he tried passing his debt to his own children, instead of accepting responsibility. Then my grandmother slowly stood and spoke the words none of us would ever forget. Children are not lifeboats for their parents' mistakes. The room fell silent again, because everyone knew she was right. Just when it seemed the evening could not become more shocking, someone knocked at the front door. A financial investigator entered the house and announced she needed to question my parents about possible mortgage fraud after receiving reports of suspicious activity. My mother broke down crying while my father stood frozen, unable to deny what had finally caught up with them. Over the following weeks, the truth completely unraveled. The house was placed on the market, my parents moved into a small apartment, and the life they had spent years pretending to have disappeared. Madison eventually realized she had been manipulated just as much as I had. She began therapy and slowly rebuilt our relationship, finally understanding why I had always kept my distance. For the first time in years, we became sisters again, instead of competitors created by our parents' favoritism. Looking back, I learned the hardest lesson of my life. Speaking the truth may hurt the people hiding lies, but silence only protects those lies from being exposed. Families built on secrets eventually collapse under their own weight, but honesty, no matter how painful, gives everyone a chance to finally begin healing.